on feet that had just been recently nailed to a cross. Then, in his weakened condition, managed to roll away a very heavy stone from the entrance of the tomb, fight off the Roman guards who obviously would have attempted to keep him in there, or sneak by them or something like that, if they're Roman guards. There are some who feel that they're temple guards, but even the temple guards themselves were under the same strictures that the Roman guards were. In the Mishnah, we read that the temple guards, if they ever were to fall asleep, would receive a whipping and their garments would be burned. And so obviously they would not try to fall asleep either. But whoever the guards were, and they're most probably Roman guards from what Matthew has to say about it, managed to slip by them or fight them off or something like that, walk the determined distance into Jerusalem to find the disciples, and then have completely healed scars to show the disciples, somehow managed to show up inside of a locked room. I mean, I think we've made it pretty obvious so far that the swoon theory just doesn't hold any water whatsoever. It has no way of jiving with the facts that we have them. About the oldest theory that has been put forth to explain the resurrection away is the theft theory, and that is the disciples stole the body of Jesus, and then to have a job, I guess, after the death of Jesus, they started preaching the resurrection, started their own church. Well, this one, of course, we're even given the origins of this one by Matthew, because Matthew tells the Jewish leaders approached the guards and gave them money and said, this is what you're to say, and if it comes to the governor's ears, we will intercede for you. Well, the reason that they had to say this was that if the guards admitted to having fallen asleep, if they were Roman guards, they were subject to the penalty of death, and so obviously the Jewish leaders would have had to have interceded on their behalf to keep them from dying. And since this is found even in the New Testament, it's not too surprising to find it common today. It has been brought up numerous times. Refuting it is rather interesting because, first of all, just on a very psychological basis, this band of disciples, as we see them presented, and of course someone who believes in this would say, well, that's their writings, they must be presenting it that way. Well, Luke wasn't one of them, and you'd have to assume that all of them are lying. This band of disciples, from all the evidence we have, were a very downtrodden, downcast group of people who were not out to go stealing bodies, fight off Roman guards, or anything of the kind. These were not trained soldiers who slipped past Roman guards and robbed tombs. They had no reason to do it. They were not inclined to deceiving people in the first place. There's no evidence that they were. There is no way to explain the fervor with which they proclaimed the gospel by saying that they themselves were well aware of the fact they were lying to people. The Jews themselves did not react in such a way as to accuse them of having stolen the body. They circulated the story, but whenever Paul or Peter or these others actually confronted the Jews are not recorded as having accused them of doing that, because it would have been folly for them to have done that. There are over 500 people that had seen Jesus alive after his resurrection, alive at that time. So the theft theory dies for lack of support. It's just simply some way of getting around the clear evidence that's presented in the New Testament about the resurrection. There's nothing in the New Testament that would support it. There's not even anything really within the secular time period that would say, yes, the disciples were this great A-team group of individuals that came running in with their M16s and stole the body. What they did with it, of course, is not known. And the Jews, later on in later history would accuse them of that after the witnesses were dead. But when the witnesses were alive themselves, we don't have any evidence that they talked about that. So the theft theory, that's a very difficult word to say. Theft theory yes. Simply does not jive with the facts as we have them. The next one that has been listed, and I'll just briefly mention what it is, and we'll take a break and come back, and we'd like to hear your comments at 245-0375, 245-0375, concerning the resurrection, what you think about the resurrection, what your feelings are at this Resurrection Sunday season that we are about to celebrate tomorrow. You've probably already begun the celebration with the Good Friday yesterday, and the Resurrection Sunday services tomorrow. We'd like to hear what you have to say at 245-0375. But very briefly, I'd just like to point out that another theory that has been given is the hallucination theory, that the appearances of Jesus Christ were mass hallucinations, and we'll be looking a little bit at what that has to say after we take this break and take your phone calls at 245-0375. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Dividing Line this afternoon as we discuss the subject of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to go to Phoenix, and one of our faithful callers standing in a phone booth. Hello, Edwina. Hello, Edwina, can you hear me? Hello, Edwina, can you hear me? Okay, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I just want to ask a question about in Luke 24, verse 13, where Jesus was walking with those two men along the road.
Yes.
And it said that they couldn't recognize him. Why was it that they couldn't recognize him?
Okay, I just happen to have my Bible open to that passage. On the road to Emmaus, Jesus encountered two disciples, and he walked with them. And it says in verse 16, but they were kept from recognizing him. And later on, it's in verse 31, it says, then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. It's very clear that a power was acting upon them to keep them from recognizing him. It was not that he was unrecognizable, but that there was a power, God's power, working on them to keep them from recognizing him until the purpose that he wished to work in their lives was accomplished. So it wasn't that Jesus was some different person or was appearing in different forms and things like that and confusing people, but it was the fact that Jesus himself was exercising a power to keep them from recognizing him. They were kept from recognizing him by the power of God itself.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot,
bye.
Edwina. Bye-bye.
Bye.
245-0375, 245-0375 is the phone number for your questions and comments. And we'd like to talk to you today about the resurrection of Jesus Christ and what it means in your life at this time of the year, at this season. And just before Edwina's phone call, we had been talking about another one of the theories that is put forth to explain away the resurrection, and that is the hallucination theory. And that is that all the appearances of Jesus Christ, as we have them recorded in the New Testament, were due to mass hallucination. The disciples so much wanted him to be alive that they all hallucinated that he had risen from the dead. Now, that's rather interesting, obviously, considering the fact that Jesus had to repeatedly appear to the disciples just to convince them of the reality of the resurrection. Those who are wishing for something so strong that they create